of women who are pregnant continue to use cannabis during pregnancy. And that's a very alarming statistic. And everything we know is that the use of cannabis during pregnancy is detrimental to the health, in particular the brain development of the fetus. So that's a real concern. I highly recommend women abstain from cannabis use during pregnancy. Talk to your OBGYN about it if you're using it all or considering using it all. So based on what I told you earlier about the fact that cannabis use is not good for egg quality, and the fact that cannabis use can disrupt the motility of sperm and therefore is not good for sperm quality, and it can disrupt the patterns of swimming in sperm in ways that reduce the likelihood of fertility, I think the take-home message is clear, which is that whether or not you want to be a cannabis user or not, if you are going to try and conceive, and certainly while you're pregnant, you're going to want to avoid the use of cannabis. And that is smoked cannabis and vaped cannabis. And during pregnancy, the consumption of cannabis, even in edible form or in tincture form, is also going to be detrimental to the developing fetus. But of course, we started this conversation in the context of body position, in particular at the point of ejaculation, in determining the sex of the offspring and or the likelihood of getting a successful fertilization in pregnancy. And I think that given that the tilting back of the pelvis, so again, this is elevating the pelvis by about 20 degrees. I don't think it has to be exact, but about 20 degrees for about 15 minutes post-ejaculation inside of the woman, or I suppose if people are using IUI, intrauterine insemination. Since that seems to be the consensus among those experts that believe that pelvic tilt backward can be beneficial for increasing the probability of fertilization, and given that it involves no cost but a little bit of time, seems to me that if you want to get pregnant, that would be the right thing to do. And as far as I know, there's no information, nor was I able to obtain any recommendations from experts about what the ideal body position of the male is after ejaculation if the goal is to increase the probability of fertilization in pregnancy. So we've been talking about behavioral interventions, some do's and some don'ts that people can do to increase their fertility and the likelihood that any fertilized egg will be carried to term successfully. And soon we'll also talk about things that people can take to improve their fertility. Now, keep in mind that this entire discussion is about fertility, but also remember, as we discussed at the beginning of the episode, trying to increase your fertility is one of the best ways to think about trying to create and maintain optimal physical health. So for people that are trying to conceive and for people who are not trying to conceive, optimizing your fertility status, whether or not you're male or female, it's one of the best ways to target those approaches. And there are now a lot of data supporting the idea that acupuncture, of all things, can be very beneficial for improving both female and male fertility, and should a woman get pregnant, for improving the quality of outcomes. That is, the likelihood that there will be a successful pregnancy that is carried to term, not premature, and so on and so forth. Now, for some of you out there, you might think, oh, of course, acupuncture. Acupuncture has been known to work for thousands of years, and therefore it's not surprising that it would assist with fertility and pregnancy. For many of you out there, however, you're probably thinking acupuncture, that seems kind of like fringe science, but what I can assure you is that there are now quite a few clinical trials funded by government agencies like the National Institutes of Health, showing that acupuncture is a very effective treatment for a number of different things, including fertility and pregnancy, but for hormone status, for stress relief, but even for chronic illnesses of different kinds, including autoimmune illnesses. So this is no longer considered fringe science. In fact, one of the best laboratories in the world working on this is a laboratory out of Harvard Medical School run by a guy named Chu-Fu Ma. Chu-Fu's lab has really been exploring in a mechanistic way how the different stimulation sites that are used in acupuncture, so where the needles are inserted, tap into neural pathways that link the different organs of the body. So for instance, they've found that stimulation of a particular site on the lower limb can reduce inflammation dramatically throughout the body by way of neural pathways that originate in the lower limb and extend to areas such as the kidney and the pancreas. So all these quote unquote ancient maps of the human body as they relate to acupuncture are now being parsed at the level of mechanism, which I think is wonderful because it not only is showing us that so much of what has been purported and reported in the landscape of acupuncture actually has an underlying mechanistic basis. And with additional mechanistic understanding, of course, always arrive new and better practices. That's the idea, to evolve these fields of acupuncture, to evolve the fields of mechanistic understanding of our biology and health. And so the issue of whether or not acupuncture can assist in getting pregnant and in carrying a child to term and for that child to be healthy are really starting to emerge in a major way. And rather than go into all those data in detail, what I can tell you is that there are clinical trials and data supporting the fact that female fertility itself can be supported by acupuncture through several mechanisms, one of which is the balancing, and I realize that's a somewhat tricky term, and I'll define it better in a moment, the balancing of hormones across the ovulatory/menstrual cycle, including regulating levels of FSH so that they're not too high nor too low, and restricting the FSH to the follicular phase of the menstrual cycle, as well as using acupuncture to improve things like blood flow and the health of the ovary itself and other aspects of the female reproductive axis. So acupuncture can operate at the chemical level, impacting hormones. It can act at the mechanical level, impacting the different tissues through which the egg has to pass, and so on and so forth. Likewise, on the male side, acupuncture has been shown to improve semen volume, quality of sperm motility, etc., and in large part through changes in the neural pathways that innervate the very tissues and vascular input to the scrotum and testicles, because as we learned earlier, temperature regulation of the scrotum and testicles is so vital for getting healthy sperm and increasing sperm quality. In addition, there are good data to support the idea that acupuncture can increase levels of testosterone, free testosterone, and the sorts of hormones that are going to support healthy hormone production and sperm production in males. And this is distinct from applying testosterone from an exogenous source, right? So when we're talking about acupuncture and increasing levels of testosterone, we're talking about increasing levels of endogenous testosterone. So those Leydig cells can support the Sertoli cells, and the Sertoli cells can make that androgen binding protein, and you get enhanced spermatogenesis. You can find evidence for all of these different features, both changes to the chemical milieu, that is the hormones, and changes to the mechanical milieu, including, for instance, improvement of the pathways leading from the seminiferous tubules to the epididymis to the vas deferens, basically clearing out the plumbing so that more quality ejaculate can be delivered, which of course is going to increase the probability of fertilization. So when you hear that acupuncture can improve the likelihood of pregnancy, that's an accurate statement for which there are now increasing amounts of mechanistic data. If you want to learn more about how acupuncture can be used to contribute to improved fertilization and pregnancy, there are a number of different excellent reviews on this, both as it relates to females and as it relates to males. One of the best papers that I happen to like is one that we'll provide a link to in the references, entitled Acupuncture and Herbal Medicine for Female Fertility, an Overview of Systematic Reviews. So a review of reviews. This was published recently in 2021. We'll provide a link to that. And there's also going to be a link to a review that relates to acupuncture for male fertility and hormone augmentation. I should just mention briefly that if you're going to look at scientific papers, one thing that you'll want to consider is also looking at the references that they reference. Now, of course, papers tend to reference a ton of references, in particular in reviews. So what you'll want to do is look for the references that are showing up most often in the introduction. Those references often are going to be the most prominent recent reviews or the most important findings in recent years. That's not always the case, but that's often the case. So if you read the first couple of paragraphs of these papers, and these are openly available as full text, by the way, online, if you go to these links, you'll be able to access the best papers, the most relevant papers in the context of acupuncture supporting female and acupuncture supporting male fertility and hormone status. Now I'd like to discuss things that both men and women can take in order to maximize their fertility. And again, when we're talking about fertility, we're talking about people who want to conceive and have children, but also we're talking about a basic measure of overall health status. So if you're somebody who does not want to conceive children, I still encourage you to think about whether or not you would want to do certain things or not do certain things in order to maximize your fertility as a means to maximize your vitality and longevity, because that's really what maximizing fertility is about for a lot of people. That said, I know a lot of people would like to conceive children, perhaps not right away, but in the future. And what I'm about to describe are some tools and interventions, that is, things that one can take in order to improve their hormone status, but also, in particular, the quality of their eggs and the quality of their sperm in the short and long term.